Hello and good morning to everyone. Welcome to episode 84 of the Knitting Expat Podcast. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes. My name is Mina and I will be your host today. Today is Wednesday, 2nd of November, so happy November everybody. It's a new month, almost the end of the year, which is slightly crazy, think about it. And I hope for those of you who celebrated or did something for Halloween, had a really good time, stayed safe and enjoyed lots of sweet treats. Places where you can find me online as Mina Phillip on Ravelry, Knitting Expat on Instagram. You can find the group for this podcast on Ravelry as the Knitting Expat Podcast group, and you can find show notes for this and all past episodes at knittingexpat.wordpress.com. I'm currently coming to you from my home in Bahrain, where I live with my husband and our 2 cats, and I'm also currently 24 and a half weeks pregnant. If you are a new viewer, thank you so much for checking me out, and if you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. And also, if you are a long-time viewer, you will know that my background looks vastly different than it normally does. I have started packing. I say packing, organising my craft room and putting away the things that I'm not going to need between now and when we move. And so for the meantime, the background's going to look a little bit weird, I guess. So yeah, we've got a lot on our plates at the moment. Thankfully, nothing overly stressful. I had been hoping that by now we would have been in a position to be able to share our news with you all, but a few things have come up in this last week that have not so much thrown a spanner in the works, but has sort of changed, not even changed, I'm trying to find the right way to describe it. A couple of things have come up this last week where it's kind of delayed our decision making, if that makes sense. We will have a decision. I mean, we're still going where we're going. It's just the details that might change a little bit, and until we have everything ironed out and we are 100% sure where we're going, I don't really want to tell anybody. I want it to be for certain when we share the news. Although we are leaving Bahrain in exactly a month, we have our flights booked to leave Bahrain on the 2nd of December, so we better figure it out pretty quickly because we're not going to be here for long. Anyway, so in other administrative stuff, the only real thing I wanted to share was that we do have a coupons thread in our group, and you can pop along there and check out what sort of coupons and offers that are being offered by other makers in the community. And if you are a maker in the community and you have a coupon that you would like to share, then please pop along and share that in that thread. So for this week, I have 3 finished objects, 3 works in progress to talk to you guys about. We have a prize to announce, some knit-along news, some shop update news, and just some general chitter chatter, some questions. There's been a few questions in the thread, so I'm just gonna cover all of that, I guess. So for those of you, actually, you know what, I'll do the shop news first because I know a lot of people are interested in that. But so my final shop update, I am scheduling that for Saturday the 19th of November at 9 PM Bahrain time. I think by then everyone whose clocks change will have changed by then, so 9 PM Bahrain time, I believe by that point should be 1 PM East Coast Standard Time and 6 PM UK time, if I'm not mistaken, 7 PM European time. So, but please use Google or some other application or whatever to double check the times. I did used to try and figure out the time zones for different places around the world, but I actually found that occasionally I made a mistake and people were relying on the times that I was giving. It is much more accurate if I just give you my local time that the update's going to be at, and you guys can figure out what that is in your local time, so I don't feel bad about making a mistake with that one. But that will be the last shop update, 9 PM Bahrain time, 19th of November. At the end of this, once I finish recording this episode, I'm going to film another clip, segment, whatever, to show you all the bags that are going to be in that update. And then at the beginning of that week, I will post that video as a separate upload, just to give you guys plenty of time to see what's going to be in the update, if there's anything you're looking for. Also because I'm not entirely sure about whether or not I'm going to have a regular podcast that week. More about that in the blabbering weekly roundup section at the end. Okay, so I hope that's okay with you guys and that all makes sense. So first up, finished objects. I have 3 finished objects, like I said, to discuss with you this week. I actually have 2 others, but they're designs that I don't want to show you yet. So just like baby hat versions of a couple of hat designs I'm working on. So first up is the Clean and Simple Baby Dress by Pearl Soho. It's got a big crease down the middle because it's been folded. But yeah, it's so cute and it's really soft. It's out of Knit Picks Comfy Sport in the pomegranate colourway. And I did a bit in the grey whisker at the bottom for the trim. So you can see that there. I wasn't sure if I was going to have enough pomegranate to finish. I probably would have just had enough. Actually no, I would have run out because I ended up using the pomegranate for the trim around the top. You kind of pick up and cast and bind off as you go. So the pattern has you pick up stitches along the edges at the top, but as you're picking up, you pick up 2 and then you bind off 1, and you pick up 1, bind off, pick up, bind off as you go. You're not actually knitting anything. It's a free pattern, so I'm not really giving anything away. But I was going to do that in the grey, but just because of the nature of the way it was going to work, you were still going to see all the red in between and it wasn't going to look nice, so I just did that all in the pomegranate colour, and then I just had the red at the bottom for the contrast, which looks really good. And then I popped on those buttons that I showed you last week, 3 of those buttons that were kindly sent to me in one of the packages, and those work perfectly. They are a little bit wonky. I am not the best at attaching buttons, to be perfectly frank, but I don't really mind. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. This is handmade, and I think perfection is a bit overrated in my opinion. I think the little flaws and the little, this is slightly crooked, and this button is slightly closer to that button than that button, doesn't bother me. Life's too short to be bothered by stuff like that. So that's another little nugget knit ready to go. Sorry, I keep cutting my head off by sitting up too straight. But yes, that's another little knitted project for the nugget, and it's actually the first dress I've made her. So it's the first, I guess, gender specific knitted item that she has. But yeah, her little stash of hand knit things is growing quite quickly. I'm thinking before I pack everything up, because not all of the things that I've knit her we're going to need straight away, because I've knit quite a few things in larger sizes. I might do a little thing just showing all the things that I've made her so far. But so one final thing, I use 3.75mm needles, which are US 5s. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's called the Clean and Simple Baby Dress by Pearl Soho. It's a free pattern. You can find it on their website and through Ravelry. The second pattern that I finished, the second project that I finished, is the bubble hat. I'll sort of crouch down a bit so you can see it better. And I love how this turned out. This is a pattern by Donna Smith, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Donna Smith. I knit it out of, it was designed last year for Shetland Wool Week, and it became really popular and everyone was knitting them, and I wanted to knit one, and I don't know why, I just never got around to it. And then last year when we went to Iceland, I picked up Let Loppy, which is the Icelandic worsted weight yarn. Sorry, my brim's a bit crooked, just where I put it on. In the blue, this sort of like grey natural colour, some black and green. But anyone who's felt Icelandic yarn or Let Loppy yarn like this will know that it is really quite scratchy. And I'm not super sensitive to wool. I have to say my sensitivity to wool has definitely decreased immensely since I started knitting. I know when I first started knitting I was very sensitive to scratchiness, but since I've started knitting I've become a lot more tolerant to it. I find that I can handle it a lot more. I guess it's just with exposure over time and just getting used to it and just sheer determination. But I find there are still some parts of my body that are really sensitive and I can't wear the scratchiness against the skin in certain places, and one of those places is my forehead. My forehead is super sensitive to the itch factor of yarn. So, and I'm not the kind of person who wears their hats on the back of their heads, kind of like that. I wish I was, but I just feel like, first of all, I feel like it looks silly on me. It looks weird, like it makes my face look funny. And also, I'm just like, that just feels like that's going to fall off at any minute. It doesn't feel secure. And to be honest, if I'm cold, like my forehead is cold, my ears are cold, I want those areas covered. I don't know, I kind of feel like a hat is more of a practical item rather than a fashion statement necessarily. I mean, I know some people wear it as that, which is fine. But for me, I'm just like, I want a hat to keep my head warm. So, while it might not be the cool way to wear it, this is pretty much how I wear my hats. Covering my ears and covering my forehead, because that's where I get cold. On my head the most. So what I did do, I did make a couple of little changes to the pattern. One change you might be able to tell straight away is I did my folded brim, which is in a bunch of my hat patterns that are now available. A lot of my recent hat patterns will have the instructions for the folded brim in it. But I also added a row in this Fair Isle section at the beginning. I don't know, the pattern only has 2 rows of these pixels, and I added a third row which was imitating the first row. I'm not really giving anything away at this point, but I just felt like it better balanced that bottom section to me. I don't know, but I did add the folded brim, and because of my sensitivity to the loppy yarn, which you can see, I don't know how well you can see how fuzzy, you see all the long guard hairs on that, that's what causes the scratchiness. I did the folded brim in a softer yarn. The yarn on the inside is a 100% merino superwash yarn by Shibodgan in the Concrete Jungle colorway. It's a single ply worsted weight yarn, and so that is what is on my forehead. The rest of the hat is on my hair, so there is very little itching at all. Like, it doesn't bother me at all, and you can't see it from the outside either. So if you're looking, the camera would focus, if you're looking, because of where I did the change, you can't really see where the grey yarn is on the inside. So it's just there, and it makes it nice and comfortable, and it just means that I can now use scratchier yarns for things like hats and things like that, and just use a alternative yarn for the inside of the brim to make it comfortable. That's a little tip for you guys if you are in a similar situation. And I knit that using 4 and 4.5mm needles, so that's the US 6 and 7. And like I said, the pattern is by Donna Smith. It is now a paid for pattern on Ravelry. It used to be a free pattern, but recently I believe it has become a paid for pattern. And I think she has a matching cowl and mittens pattern as well that she's released recently. So definitely make sure you go and check that out. And the final finished object I have to show you is this bright orange cowl. I was sent this yarn a few weeks ago by the lovely people at Wool Couture. It is their 100% superwash merino, super bulky or super chunky, I think they call it on their website, single ply yarn. They also sent me some 15mm needles to use to knit up a project with it. And I actually filmed a little vlog / tutorial style video to go along with this, showing you how I knit this cowl. I also include instructions in the video description on how to knit this stitch, which is a fisherman's rib. And so yeah, I just sort of take you through step by step how I knit it, and there's even a little Hugo supervision involved in there as well. So for those of you who are Hugo fans, make sure you go and check that out. And that video is up on my channel already. And so this is what it looks like. See what the big seam down the back there, and knit it flat. And it is reversible. The stitch is completely reversible on the right side and the wrong side. It looks the same. And you may notice that this looks a lot like brioche. And fisherman's rib is kind of, in my opinion, I think I've heard it referred to as this a few times in other places, is it's kind of like the cheats version of brioche, because you're not actually doing the brioche technique. You're just using combinations of knits and knit one belows to get this sort of effect. So it's not full, it's not proper brioche, but it gives a brioche effect. And it's really simple, really fun to do. And let's see if I can put it on and show you what it looks like. So this is what it looks like doubled up. It's a bit fluffing around, but it's nice and warm and cozy for around the neck. or you could just wear it as a single layer. Straighten it out. I'll show you this in the video as well, and just sort of tuck it over itself for like going underneath a coat or something, which would also be really nice and warm and keeps this whole part of your body nice and toasty. And yeah, I think I just took one skein of their super chunky yarn, which I believe is like 200 grams. You get 130 meters, and literally I used every single last bit of yarn for this cowl. You could also make 2 cowls out of it, which were just a single loop rather than a double loop like this one. But yeah, really fun, really quick. Just did it in a few hours, and so yeah, that should be nice for the winter. Okay, and that is it for finished objects. For works in progress, I have 3 things, like I said, to show you. First up is the design shawl that I've been working on for the last couple of weeks. This is out of the Gala yarns. They're the alpaca that I showed you guys last week. Gala yarns, prime alpaca. I picked this up in the US back in January. It's a massive skein. It was a 227 gram, 8 ounce skein, 660 yards or 603 meters. And it is drastically smaller now. It is almost a normal size skein. It's marketed as being a DK weight, but it actually knits up more of a sport weight gauge, and the meterage and yardage is more of a sport weight type yardage, but it is pretty soft. It does have a slight alpaca itch to it, but it's not something that I am super sensitive to. It's not the scratchiest alpaca I've ever felt, but it is still alpaca. I'll show you briefly where I'm at with the shawl, if I can find the end. So this is the back. Can't really see much, but I had been hoping to have had this finished by this week, so I wouldn't have to take it with me to the UK to work on it. But I did have this on my hires before. And then a few days ago, I switched into my zings because I thought, well, I'm not going to finish this in time, and if I want to take them on the plane, I really don't like taking, whilst I've never had any issues with taking needles on planes, I've never had any problems with traveling or airlines stopping to search my knitting or to take my needles away or anything like that. It would break my heart if my hire interchangeable set got, like if a set of those needles got taken away. I would rather lose these needles and have to replace these than to like lose one of the pairs of needles from the set that I've got for my hires. So I don't take my high sharps on the plane. The only high sharps I do take on the plane are my sock needles. Those I've never had any issues with. Anyway, point being, I switched to the zings, and I've actually found it's been much nicer to knit this shawl on the zings than it was on the high sharps. The sharps were just splitting the yarn left, right and center. It's quite splitty, this yarn, but with the zings, because they are a much blunter tip, it was less of an issue. And it's been knitting along. I've been able to knit on it a lot faster and a lot longer than I was with the high sharps. So I'm a lot closer to being finished than I was earlier this week, but still not close enough that I don't think I'll be finished before I go. I just haven't had enough knitting time this week, to be quite honest. I'm knitting those on 4mm needles, US 6s. It's going to be my own design, and the colourway was Mist Grey. It was number 303, Mist Grey, for that yarn. I've been really busy this week with tidying up the craft room, Perry getting back, which was really nice, and also just a lot of things that need to be sorted. So haven't had all that much knitting time. But anyway, so which is why I haven't gotten much progress on that one, or as much progress as I would have liked. But my next work in progress is in one of my project bags, and this is a pair of socks which I showed you last week. I had only just cast on one cuff, but now I have cast on both, and I am partway down the leg. This is going to be a pair of socks for my father-in-law, just some plain sort of manly colours, I guess. It's a Regia 4-ply yarn. Find the tag. Oh, come on. Why are you not focusing? There we go. And it's colour number 7709. It's just simple self-striping in sort of a grey and blue and stuff colours. I have it split into 2 balls. And I'm just knitting a pair of socks. These are on my high sharps on 2.5mm needles, US 1.5s. And these will be coming on the plane with me. Like I said, I've never had any issues with high sharps on planes before. So those are coming with me. Nice and simple. I didn't knit on these too much, purely to keep them as simple plain knitting for when we're on our way. The next pair of socks that I have on the needles is in this lovely bag sent to me by the lovely Alison of the Yarn Parlour. I talked about this last week. But in here I have a pair of socks for my dad. This is on high sharps as well, US 1s, these are 2.25mm needles. And these are the pebble socks, which is one of my designs from my Beyond Vanilla Part 1. And the yarn that I'm using for this is a Crazy Zalba ball. Tag. It's Crazy Zalba ball in the Herbst Wind colourway. Oh, come on, focus. It wants to focus on everything except the tag. Why are you being so difficult? There we go. Herbst Wind colourway. That's kind of what it looks like. And I picked up this skein, I can't remember when now, but I think it must have been earlier this year. I picked up this skein of yarn thinking to myself, oh, like my dad would really like these colours. I'm pretty sure he'll really like them, blah, blah. And I get home and I realised, I look at it again, and I obviously didn't look at the colourway name in the store, but I get home and I look at it again, and I'm like, well, of course he'll like these colours, because I've already knit him a pair of socks out of this colourway, which is why this pair has the pattern on it, because the first pair were plain vanilla, and this pair are the pebble socks, so at least you can differentiate between the two. So yeah, so it turns out I've already knit him a pair of socks out of that colourway, but he really does love them and he wears them all the time. They were actually the very first pair of socks I ever knit my dad, which I gave to him for his birthday last September. So he really loves them, and so I am more than happy to knit him another pair in that colourway. So that's it for my works in progress. I had hoped to have cast on a couple of other things by now, but like I said, just have not had as much time to knit as I would have liked. But yeah, been busy, as you can tell by the empty shelves behind me. Okay, so next up with acquisitions, I don't have anything new to share with you. But as for posting stuff, I said last week that if you had sent me something and hadn't let me know, to please get in touch and let me know that you had sent it. And one person has to tell me that something's already on its way. A couple of other people got in touch saying that they were planning on sending me something, but whether or not they should wait. And so what I'm going to say to you guys now is, if you are planning on sending me something and you haven't sent it by the end of this week, by the end of this weekend, don't send it. Don't send it now. Wait until after we've moved. Just because, especially if you're posting from the US, then sometimes it can take up to a month for things to get here, and we're not going to be here in a month. So, and I'm going to have to close the PO box, or cancel our PO box about a week or so before we move anyway. So I really don't want something to get lost or not to get to me and stuff like that. So if you haven't sent anything, it would probably be best for you to wait until after we've moved. So yeah, if you do want to send me something but you want to wait, please by all means get in touch. I will put your details aside, set your email aside, and then once we have an address in our new place where we're headed to, I can get in touch with you and let you know where to send things. At that point, I feel like I've just waffled. I hope that made sense. Basically, I'm just going to say, don't really send anything now. Just because it's, unless you're going to send it in the next day or two, don't send it now, just because it's going to be cutting it quite close and I'd be worried about it not getting here. Next up, we have knit along and giveaway news. First up, we have a giveaway to announce. That was for this pile of leftovers that I had from my Blue Sands cardigan and an old school Mina Makes bag that I found whilst tidying up, and a pattern by the lovely Madeline of the Antonia shawl, which I talked about last week as well. The prompt was, what would you do with the yarn prize, and or what colourway would you use to knit the shawl? We had 245 posts, 244 without my first post, and the winner was number 112, and that's Nordic Stitches, so congratulations to Lily from Norway. And she said that she would knit a Fair Isle hat with matching wrist warmers, and she'd love to make an awesome set like that. And also she'd knit the shawl out of a beige cotton yarn because she'd been making it for herself. So congratulations, Lily. Get in touch with me with your address and your details, and I will mail this out to you, probably from the UK at this point. I'll take it with me and I will mail it to you from the UK. Which actually, considering you're in Norway, it will get to you much quicker than if I mail it to you from here. Then next up, we have knit along news. As for the knit alongs we currently have going on are the Riot of Colour Cal and the Wee Little Knits Along. Both of the Wee Little Knits Along has been co-hosted with Melissa of the Spicy Homemaker podcast, and the Riot of Colour Cal is just one I'm hosting on my own in the group. Details and everything on what you need to enter are in the chatter and FO threads. Sorry, for both of those. And the chatter thread for the Wee Little Knits Along is only in the Spicy Homemaker group, and the FO thread is in my group. I've chatted with Melissa and we've agreed that the end date for the Cal will be the 20th of November, which is a Sunday. So the end of the day on Sunday. So I will close it Monday morning when I wake up. And that will be for both knit alongs. So Riot of Colour and the Wee Little Knits Along will both end at the end of the day on the 20th. I will close the thread on Monday, the 21st in the morning when I wake up. And then I will announce prizes that week, and I will again do what I did last time and upload a separate video for that as well. So I hope that all makes sense and is clear. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break and I'll be back with you in a second. So back again with Q&A next. So first up, we have a question from Winton B on Ravelry from the US, and she says, hello Mina, after watching your latest podcast with the leftovers giveaway, it got me to wondering what you do with your leftover skeins, aside from amazing scrap blankets. I seem to have jars, bags filled with good intentions, and even a drawer full of wool bits that someday I will use to make dryer balls. In the spring I have also been known to put the wool bits around our yard for the birds to use in making nests. Only 100% wool that's not processed in any way. Thank you for your consideration. Best of luck packing up. Thank you. Well, in terms of leftovers, so like I said, other than using leftovers for my sock yarn blankets, I do keep a lot of my scraps, even like the heavier weight yarns and stuff. I do keep a lot of them. A lot of them I've actually found that now I dig into when I'm knitting things for the baby, because baby knits often take much less yarn than adult knits. So like for example the sweater that I showed last week, I think it was, the striped baby sweater, that was all out of leftovers. I've knit quite a few things for her now, for our baby, out of leftovers, so baby knits are always a good one to use up leftovers. You can see behind me here there's a big purple bag on the shelf there. That's all my sock yarn leftovers, and that's all the sock yarn leftovers from projects that I've knit that have already been knit into a blanket. So that's all the leftovers after I've used the scraps in a scrap blanket. And then next to it, this little like bag thing there has all my other heavier weight yarns like DK, Sport, Worsted weight yarns, bulky, whatever, leftovers in that bag. So I kind of have my scraps organized like that. That is all the scraps I have left at the moment. I did do a lot of swaps earlier this year and last year. I took part in a lot of swaps, both ones that I just set up personally one-on-one with people and in groups and stuff like that. So I did do a lot of mini skein swaps, so I got rid of a lot of scraps that way. But honestly, I don't have a lot of plans for those, and I'm starting to think now that with all the organising stuff, I've been starting to think about what I'm going to do with all these scraps, and I think the majority of it will go towards making things for the baby. You can also, with fingering weight scraps, if you have a lot of them, and larger quantities of scraps, not just 5 or 10 grams, if you have larger amounts, you can always hold them double, and fingering weight held double typically gives you a worsted weight type yarn. So you can knit up sort of like heavier weight scrap blankets quicker, or you could crochet them or stuff like that. Honestly, I'm a little bit at a loss as to what to do with all the scraps that I currently have. I do have a lot. I think next year might be a year for using scraps as well, and trying to reduce the amount of scraps that we have in our stash, whether it's making minis and sending them out into the world, or little scrap projects. I might do some Christmas ornaments. That would be a good one to do with scraps, because those are quite small, like little stuffies or little Christmas ornaments, or just little things, little toys in general. Again, like I said, if you've got large enough quantities of leftover scraps, you can hold them double to get like a worsted weight to do a knitted toy. It'd be interesting to see what you guys do with your scraps as well. So that'll be a question for you guys this week as well. What do you do with your leftovers, scrap yarn, other than scrap blankets? What other projects do you use those leftovers for? It'd be really interesting to get some ideas for that. So thank you to Winton B for that question, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, everyone else, on what you do with them. Next up, we have a question from Mama Goose NH, and she's also from the US. And she says, when knitting cuff down socks, how do you estimate when to start the heel so that you know you have enough yarn? Okay, so this just, I knit very long cuffs. Typically, I knit cuffs as long as my foot length, or possibly even longer. And just for reference, I wear a US size 10. I think now my foot size has actually grown quite a bit recently. 10 to 11, I would say, is a sort of like approximate shoe size that I wear for American shoe sizes. In the UK, it's about an 8.5 UK size. So typically for me, and I have this actually included in my, I have a free sock pattern, Mina's 2 at a time socks, which goes through my typical sock recipe, as it were. And what I typically do, whether it's knitting socks for myself or for someone else, is I knit a 20 row cuff, like ribbed cuff, and then I do 60 to 80 is the average, 60 to 80 rounds for the leg after the cuff. So my total leg length is around 80 to 100 rows. And I do count rows, and I use stitch markers. Like every 10 or 20 rows, I'll pop in a stitch marker, and then 20 rows later, I'll move it up. And that way I keep track of how many rows I've knit. I find I prefer that. It just suits me. Some people keep track of inches, but I keep track of rows, just because I find with measuring knitwear, knitting in general, counting rows is more accurate than counting the length, measuring the length, because the length that you measure will often change depending on how you're laying out your knitting and whether you've stretched it or not, or and anyway, so I prefer to count rows, just personal preference. And then I put in the heel. So after about 80 to 100 rows total, I put in the heel, and then I knit the foot for as long as I need. Now for me, foot length, I usually do, again, depends on the thickness of the yarn and what sort of gauge I'm getting, but typically I will do around 65-ish rounds in the foot, and before starting my toe decreases. And again, I use a rounded toe decrease, which is roughly 17 rows. So the way that I look at it, my foot length after I finish the heel uses about 75 rounds worth of knitting. Bear in mind the toe is decreasing, so you actually have less yarn in the toe, but let's just say 75 rounds total, just to be, sorry, no, more than that, 80 rounds total, just to be safe. And then I have at least 80 rounds in the leg, so theoretically the socks should be equal length in the leg as they are in the foot. So if you know how much yarn you use to knit your foot, so say for example you don't want to count rows, you just want to go by grams. Another way that you could do it is you knit a pair of socks as you normally would at the moment. Once you've passed the heel, or actually even before you start the heel, you can weigh your yarn, then finish your sock and weigh how much yarn you have left. And then you'll know how much yarn you use to knit your foot, for example. And say that's like, say you use 15 grams to knit the heel and the foot of your sock, for example. Round it up to 20, just to be safe, to account for differences in yarns and different weights, assuming you're knitting all with fingering weight at this point. So when you come to knit another pair of socks, if you split your yarn into two 50-gram cakes, or if you're knitting one at a time, and you want to use as much of the 100-gram skein of yarn as you have, you can knit your leg, essentially, for 30 grams before starting the heel, knowing you're going to have enough left to finish the foot for your foot measurement. You can do the same thing for different foot sizes or different people as well. I hope that's making some sort of sense. I'm trying to see, okay, I have a foot cut out here. This is Perry's foot cut out. And so sometimes what I do is I will knit, if you don't know, for example, if you've not knit a sock for the person before, you have a cutout and you don't know how much yarn it's going to take to knit their foot, so you don't know where to stop. So what you can do, you start the cuff, you knit the leg for as, you know, for as long as the foot, for example, or until where you would normally stop because you're unsure of how much yarn you have left. Try it on the foot, see how far it goes for the leg. Then weigh your yarn, see how much you have left. If you have more than half of the yarn left, or more than 25 grams left of the yarn, because I'm going with the assumption that you've got 50 grams for each leg, for each sock. So assuming you've knit, say you've knit your leg this length so far, and if you weigh the yarn and you see you still have more than 25 grams left, you could probably keep going on the length, because you've seen how much that's. Does that make sense? So say you knit the leg as long as the foot. So I realise I'm babbling at this point and I might not be making much sense. If you knit the leg as long as the foot, you can weigh the yarn. Usually for Perry's size foot, and he is a UK 10.5, so I think that's like a US, I don't know how US men's sizes differ to the way women's sizes work, but it's big, pretty big. By the time I get to the end of his foot, if I measure the yarn that I have left, typically I have more than half of the 50 grams left after I finish knitting his foot. So I can actually knit it a little bit longer. So knowing how many grams I've used, say it's used like 20 grams, for example, to knit this length for the leg, I know as long as I have 20 grams left, I will be able to knit his foot as well. So typically when I knit Perry socks, he likes long legs on his socks, so I do knit until, more often than not with his socks, I have less than 10 grams left over at the very end of the entire skein because of that method. So I knit as long as the foot, weigh to see how much yarn I have left, and once I get to the point, I keep knitting until I get to like the halfway mark, as long as it's less than halfway to the end of the foot for the leg. Okay, someone tell me, if you didn't understand any of what I just said, I will try and write it up into a post or something that might make more sense than me blabbering on for 10 minutes trying to explain that. In my head it makes more sense than it seems to be making when I speak out loud. So yeah, if you didn't understand that, please tell me and I will try and do better at explaining it. I feel like my brain is a bit fried at the moment because of everything that's been going on lately. But yeah, I hope some of that made sense. I'm really sorry if it didn't. Please do tell me if that didn't make any sense to you, or if you're more confused than you were when I started talking, and I will try and address it again in the future. Maybe when I have an actual example to show you on hand, might be easier. Okay, moving on to the last question now. It is from Domitula12 on Ravelry, and she says, I have a question about citric acid soaks. I haven't had the chance to knit with hand-dyed yarn, but I splurged and bought my first skeins. They are lovely. I just wanted to know, if I do the citric acid soak, let it dry, do a swatch, do I still have to wash my swatch after that to see how my gauge is? I would love a tutorial for this. I don't know what I have to do with my hand-dyed yarn. Thanks so much. Okay, so there's actually a couple of questions in there. First of all, from my understanding, A citric acid soak only works if you then heat set the yarn afterwards. The citric acid soak should have been done by the person who's dyed the yarn in the first place. They will have soaked the yarn in some sort of acid, whether it's citric acid or vinegar, when they're dyeing the yarn to set the dye, and then they will have washed the yarn afterwards, so, and dried it and everything. So you shouldn't need to do a citric acid soak with hand dyed yarn because it should already be colour fast and set. Having said that, there are some dyes and some colours that are harder to set than others. Like, I know really deep saturated blues and reds are very prone to bleeding after they've been knit up. Now, if you're only knitting something in the solid colour or in that one particular colourway, it's not so much of an issue because you're not going to have the issue of the colour bleeding. But if you're knitting it with a white or a lighter coloured yarn, then you might have a concern about it bleeding. In which case, I know I've never done this. I have not been able to find citric acid where I am here, so I've never actually done this myself. But from what my understanding of the process is that you would soak your yarn before you've knit it, if you wanted to, or after, in a bath of citric acid and water, or vinegar and water, and then you would have to heat set it. And there are videos and tutorials online on how to heat set yarn. Like I said, I've never done it myself, so I'm not going to give instructions on how to do it. And there are varieties of methods that you can heat set, after which you will rinse and dry your yarn. But whether or not, that's a separate thing altogether. If you're swatching for a project and you want to check your gauge, then yes, you will have to, if you want to get an accurate gauge, you will have to knit a suitable sized swatch, and you will have to soak the swatch and dry it and lay it out to dry, and then measure your gauge to get an accurate representation of your gauge. Just because you've washed your yarn before you knit it doesn't mean you don't need to wash your swatch, because the yarn, especially if it's hand dyed yarn, has already been washed before you receive it, because when the dyer is dyeing it, they rinse and wash the yarn before it dries and they sell it to you. They don't sell it to you unwashed. So there's not really much, and I can't really do a tutorial for this because it's not really something to do a tutorial for, I guess. You knit your swatch to the size that you need to be able to measure your gauge, then you bind it off, you soak it in some water, and wool wash if you want. You don't necessarily have to do that with the swatch. And also when you soak your swatch, also that will give you an idea as to whether or not your yarn will run or whether it will bleed. And then you lay it out flat to dry. You treat your swatch the way you would treat your finished items. So if you're swatching for a sweater, then you just lay it flat to dry, unless you're planning on pinning out your sweater, in which case you then pin out the swatch. But if you're swatching for a shawl and you're planning on stretching and pinning out the shawl when it's wet to shape it, then you will do the same thing with your swatch. You just treat it the way you would the finished object. So I hope that answers your question. Theoretically, and in the ideal world sort of situation, you shouldn't have to do anything to your hand dyed yarn before you knit with it. You shouldn't have to do a citric acid soak. You shouldn't have to do any of that stuff because it should have all been done by the dyer. I personally have never done a citric acid soak on any of my yarns because I've never had access to citric acid. I've not done the vinegar soak either. There are a couple of things I have knit which do need to be heat set because the yarn wasn't dyed correctly or wasn't heat set correctly. The dye wasn't heat set correctly on the yarn. So it bled a lot when I washed it, but I just haven't got around to it yet. So I don't really have anything from personal experience to be able to offer in that regard. I know there are some tutorials online that you can find for heat setting dyes and stuff like that, if that's what you're interested in. But I would say, rather than going through the process of doing a citric acid soak and things like that with your hand dyed yarn, is knit up a little swatch first, soak it, see if it bleeds at all. Because if it doesn't bleed, then you don't need to do anything about it at all. You don't need to bother with the citric acid soak. So I hope that helps. And if you have any more questions about that, please do let me know. I'd be more than happy to try and help out. And if anyone has any feedback or information or suggestions in that regard, feel free to leave a comment in the thread in the group. Okay. Sorry. Finally, on to the last little section. Bit of a week in review. I already talked about shop news at the beginning, so I'm not going to go over that again now. But Perry's back from Hong Kong, which is lovely. It's been nice to have him back, even though it's only been a few days and I'm off again tomorrow. But he'll be joining me in London a few days after, so it should be fine. Like I mentioned earlier, things are still a little bit uncertain regarding where we are moving to, although it's really now just a matter of days. Like I said, a couple of little things have just cropped up that have not so much thrown a spanner in the works as kind of just added to the decision-making process, if that makes sense. I don't think it's going to stop us going. It may just depend. It sounds so confusing. It's really not. But once we've made the final choice, we're both really excited to finally be able to share it with everybody and tell people where we're going, what we're doing, and just be able to have it out there and not be so secretive about it anymore. The little one is still kicking like a trooper. She's going at it, and you're really starting to be able to feel her kicks on the outside now and even be able to see them, which is really fun. It's been fun for Perry as well. The boys have been really sweet. Derek is very much indifferent to the fact that I'm pregnant. He climbs onto the bed in the morning and he wants attention, but he will lay as far away from me as he can possibly get while still being just within hand's reach so I can reach him, just give him, to pet him and stroke him in the morning. Hugo, however, seems to have discovered the fact that I'm pregnant and now comes and actually snuggles up next to the belly occasionally. The other night he came and he looked like he was about to walk across my belly. And Perry was like, no, like tried to stop him. I said, don't, he's just gonna like cuddle up next to me. And then lo and behold, he just sort of laid there next to me on the bed and just put his paw on the belly. It was very, very cute and adorable. And I think it kind of melted Perry's heart a little bit. He was like, oh, it's so cute. And it is very cute. I think Hugo's kind of realised now that I'm pregnant or that there's something happening. But yeah, so that's that. I had another appointment with my doctor yesterday, so that went well, all fine. Baby's doing good. She was in a little bit of a hurry because she had a woman in labour to go tend to, so that was perfectly understandable. And then I had another appointment with my osteopath. And yeah, so the situation with my back, the thing is, a lot of pregnant women have back problems during their pregnancy, which is perfectly normal. But the problem is, because I have pre-existing problems with my back, the pregnancy is just making everything worse, and it's actually just exacerbated my pre-existing back condition. And because I'm pregnant, I can't get any diagnostic tests done. I can't have an MRI, I can't have an X-ray, I can't get all of those things that would normally be done to check what's wrong with my back or how much worse it's gotten. I had an MRI done back when I was like 24, it's about 6 years ago now. And back then, I was told afterwards that I had quite, what was the terminology they used? I had my lower spine, my lower lumbar area was heavily compressed, like the vertebrae in my lower back were very compressed. And the doctor looking at the scan was saying, I would expect to see a scan like this from someone who is in their mid-40s, not someone who's in their mid-20s. So like the degeneration and the compression in my back is a lot worse than it should be for someone of my age. And since getting pregnant, it has just gotten worse. The pain has gotten worse, and obviously the pregnancy isn't helping, but it's also, I think it's one of those things, because my back pains before, they sort of came and went, they weren't constant. At the moment it's pretty consistent, it's pretty much all the time. I cannot seem to get comfortable no matter what I do. Everything is just a certain level of discomfort at all times. It's not always painful necessarily, it's uncomfortable. But it has been quite painful lately, the last week or so. But yeah, so like I said, because I am pregnant, I can't get any sort of diagnostic tests done or scans or anything like that. I have to wait until after the baby's born to get an MRI done. But from what I've been telling my osteopath and from what he can feel on my back and from my history, it's quite likely that it's just getting more compressed, and I think it's starting to affect the nerves, which is why I'm getting some sort of I'm getting sciatica type pains, but it's not sciatica, and it's just because the nerves are now being affected by the pressure in my lower back. So, and again, I can't take any medication for it. I can't get any tests done to confirm that this is actually what is happening. It's just what my osteopath is thinking is happening based on his experience and from what he can tell from what he's seeing and feeling and what I'm telling him. So, which isn't particularly great, to be honest. I'm only 24 weeks in. I'm over halfway, but there's still a long way to go. And it's going to be, you know, I can't walk for more than 20 minutes at a time. Like, I can't be on my feet for longer than that because it gets, I'm basically already waddling when I walk. I'm pretty much waddling like a really heavily pregnant person. And occasionally the pain is quite bad to the point that I'm limping. And it's not fun. It's not particularly enjoyable, but it is what it is. And I've dealt with back pain pretty much my whole life. I've had issues with my back since I was a child. So it's nothing particularly new. It's just, like I said, it's gotten progressively worse. And it's something that I'm going to have to deal with more aggressively after the baby's born. There's just not much I can do about it now. But in the meantime, my osteopath, he's obviously aware that we're moving, but he recommended an inversion table. And at first he wasn't sure whether I should be able to use one or should use one because I'm pregnant. But he did a bit of research into it and he spoke to my doctor, and she said there was nothing wrong with it as long as obviously the motions and everything were slightly limited and my use of it was limited. She said that should be fine. So he is actually letting me borrow his inversion table until we move. So he brought it around last night, got it set up and showed me how to use it, and I'm not allowed to use it on my own. Perry has to be there to make sure that nothing goes wrong, and he's limited the motions, so I can't tilt more than a certain amount. But he's like, that's just gonna get you to be getting the load off your back. It'll help to decompress the spine, it'll help to relieve some of that pressure, and I'm only supposed to use it for 30 seconds at a maximum at a time. And like I said, he's limited the range of motion, so I can't tilt all the way. So he's basically kept it to the minimum amount that I can do for it to be safe. Because again, I'm pregnant, so there's issues around that as well. But yeah, so it's very much going to have to be something that I will have to deal with after, deal with more aggressively and more forcefully once the baby's out. Can't do anything about it otherwise, other than just try and manage the pain and manage the symptoms. Anyway, other than that, craft room is pretty much all packed up now. I've gone through and sorted through everything in here. I say packed up, it's not actually all packed up. The movers pack everything up. I've just organized everything. The only thing I have left to organize is my desk, and that's mostly just my knitting notions and stuff like that. So even if I don't get around to doing that today, that'll be pretty simple and quick to do once I get back. I've started packing my bags for the trip. You can see pile there. You see there's 2 bags there, but actually Perry gets to bring 2 bags with him when he flies, so the second bag is going to be stuff that he's bringing. We're, I say getting rid, not really getting rid, but giving a lot of things to our families that we're not going to be able to take with us for whatever reason or not need. So we're just going to be giving things to my family, Perry's family, and friends and stuff. That I've got a whole bunch of knitwear that's going to be gifted to family and friends. So yeah, mostly packed. Just have a few little bits to pack up today, and then we'll be done. And I leave tomorrow morning. My flight's quite early from here, but I have a layover in Dubai for a couple of hours, and then I get home tomorrow evening back to my parents' place, which would be nice. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the cooler weather, and I've got a friend's wedding this weekend, which would be nice. I know there's the Yarn Emporium, like Yarn Festival, Fibre Festival is happening this weekend in London. I unfortunately won't be able to go. I didn't know about it until this last week. I saw a few people posting about it on Instagram. But because I'm going to my friend's wedding on Saturday, and it's out of London, so I won't be getting back to London until the Sunday, probably early afternoon. I'm not likely to be in any sort of fit state to actually want to go to a Fibre Festival. So unfortunately I won't be able to go to that. It would have been fun to go, but it's just bad timing. And so yeah, so unfortunately I won't be there, and I probably won't be doing much in the way of yarny related things on this trip. But like I did mention last week, I don't think I'll be doing a regular sort of podcast while I'm away, but I will be vlogging while I'm away, kind of like what I did when I went to Dubai. I may split it into 1 or 2 or 3 vlogs rather than just one long vlog if that works out to be better. I'll see how things go, and I'll do what I did when I went to Dubai, sort of talk to you about my projects, what I'm knitting, what I finished and stuff sort of throughout, because a lot of the things I'm taking to work on projects I'm working on, like the 2 pairs of socks, I have another couple of pairs of socks of yarn I'm taking with me, and a few other things. So some of those won't be coming back with me because I'll be gifting them to family while we're there. So for that reason, I will be talking about them on the vlog as well, because I won't have them to show you when I get back. Otherwise, I think that pretty much covers it. It's been a shorter episode this week, but like I said, I've still got quite a bit to do today, and I want to spend some time with Perry before I go, and I need to film the project bags for the update. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for joining me this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm sorry if it felt a bit rushed. Like I said, I have quite a bit to get on with today, and do let me know if you have any questions. There is a Q&A thread in the group. You can by all means ask me any questions you have there. It could be anything related to knitting or life or anything really. I'm pretty happy to answer most questions. Yeah. So thank you until we speak again. Like I said, I get back really late on Tuesday night when we come back, and because I usually podcast on Wednesdays, I'm not sure I will get a podcast the following week either. But I was thinking of podcasting on the Thursday after we get back, which is the 17th. But I actually have 2 doctor's appointments on the 17th, one with my osteopath and one with my baby doctor. So that's going to take up all of the morning. So I don't actually know if I'm going to have time to do a podcast before Friday. I might do a short one during that. I don't know. We'll see how things go. There might be 1, might be 2 weeks without a podcast. We will see how it goes. Hopefully not that long. If it does end up being that long, there will be vlogs going up. So there will be something. Anyway, I'm blabbering on now. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Until next time, take care. Happy knitting. Bye.